Hey guys, what's up? All is well with me. I trust the same is true for you, hey? Today is the 17th of December. Wow, we had lots of activity over this past weekend. I'm telling you, unbelievable. One day Msimanga resigns and Msimang. The next day he walks back his resignation. So I want to read the letter of his walking back of his resignation so that we try to reconcile it with his resignation and get to a conclusion jointly and severally whether or not any human being who's worth their salt, who has a pinch of integrity, one brain cell that is properly functioning, would necessarily have walked back from such a letter. Let's go. Mavuso Msimang backtracks on resignation after ANC agrees to exclude leaders implicated in state capture. The ANC has announced that veteran Mavuso Msimang has rescinded his resignation as the party agrees to exclude from 2024 parliamentary lists members who have been implicated in state capture and have not been cleared by the Integrity Committee. Did you hear that? And have not been cleared by the Integrity Committee. So the Integrity Committee is going to second guess Zondo's findings after we have spent $1 billion on the state capture. Amazing. Amazing. In any case, let me not put the cart before the horse. Let's proceed. The ANC has indicated that Mavuso Msimang will continue serving the party, and after a meeting on Tuesday, the 12th December, facilitated by the Veterans League, in a statement issued by the governing party on Thursday, the organization also noted that its Secretary General Fikile Mbalula regrets utterances he made about Msimang in the public domain. Now, that's a lie. He doesn't regret it. That's what they do. Just go back and check what Fikile said about Ace Magashule. Now, I'm not saying he was wrong, but I'm simply saying that's their modus operandi, okay? They insult people who leave the organization. It's just that simple. In this regard, we are pleased that Comrade Msimang has agreed to withdraw his resignation and will continue to speak against any malfeasance impacting the interest of society. Amazing. The ANC will continuously seek the wise counsel of the elders of the ANC in whose footsteps we walk. Okay, that's desperation. The SG regrets that he made comments that impugned the integrity of Comrade Msimang, suggesting that he was vulnerable to taking bribe from a newly established political formation, or for that matter, any other source. Now, Fikile was simply projecting what they do in the ANC. Okay? That other political parties also bribe people as much as the ANC does, because he has no way of knowing what he said publicly. But nevertheless, that's what compulsive liars do, isn't it? Now let's read there. He says, for that matter, any other source, party spokesperson Mahlengi Bheki Mutsiri said. Now, the ANC has also committed to deal swiftly with ill-disciplined members, including those implicated in the state capture. Well, this is another point. When we look at the letter that Msimang wrote, that letter completely brings this organization into disrepute. So if he goes back to it, he deserves to be disciplined, because he either was telling the truth or was demonstrating ill discipline. Nevertheless, let's continue. In addressing the concerns of ANC members, and indeed all South Africans, the leadership of the ANC will act with urgency to address the unethical behavior and ill discipline of members, including leaders of the party. Now, that's a serious joke, because you voted against the Section 89 report in Parliament that sought to hold the president to account. Come on now, stop lying to us. We are not idiots. We are determined that only members whose reputations are beyond reproach will be included in our list of candidates for Parliament and provincial legislature. That means nobody will be included in the ANC, because all of them, and you'll see this in Msimang's letter, all of them are corrupt. This means that those implicated by the Zondo Commission will not be included in our list if their names have not been cleared by the ANC Integrity Commission. Now, that should worry anybody who thinks, why should Zondo report findings be a subject of review by an ANC Integrity Commission? How can an ANC Integrity Commission have integrity? I mean, just think about it. You're talking about a paradox. ANC integrity. Really, the statement read. Now, Mbalula last week said the veterans were campaigning against the party instead of using the direct lines to the ANC's leadership to discuss their concern. Msimang sent his resignation letter last week to ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula and his assistant within hours. It was leaked on WhatsApp groups. In the letter, Msimang raised myriad of issues which the party had failed to tackle. This includes the party allowing its members implicated in state capture to be nominated to serve in parliament and provincial legislatures in next year's elections. Mbalula then accused Msimang of having submitted his resignation via the media and said the former Veterans League deputy president was likely to join outgoing First Rand CEO Roger Jardin's new party, Change Starts Now. Can you see that? To which Msimang responded via a video. Msimang denied he was joining Change Starts Now, but said Jardine had consulted him before the party was formed. Well, first of all, he said, I have not joined any party, and secondly, it's insulting to suggest that I accepted a bribe. Another deliberate lie of Mbalula is that I announced my resignation from the ANC through the media. He knows very well that around 3:50 p.m. on December 6, I sent an email to himself and to his PA exclusively at Luthuli House. It's only when I was called by the media that I responded to confirm the veracity of this letter. I had to control the narrative of my resignation. It's really a pity that the ANC has a person like Mbalula as its Secretary General. It's an embarrassment. Attempts to get an immediate response from Msimang were not successful at the time of publication. Okay, so let's go to his letter then and see if indeed this is something that could be done to walk back what's in the letter. Here we go. Why I'm resigning from the ANC, Mavuso Msimang. Dear Secretary General, now the purpose of us going through his letter is to see if this letter can be woken back from, okay? It's my submission that you can't. But as I said at the end, we can jointly and severally decide by stating that in the comments below. Dear Secretary General, letter of resignation. It is with profound sadness that I inform you of my decision to terminate my membership of the African National Congress. I have served the organization loyally and diligently for over 6 decades. For several years now, the ANC has been wrecked by endemic corruption with devastating consequences on the governance of the country and the lives of the poor people, of whom there continue to be so many. Now let's analyze the paragraph. Endemic means deeply rooted, embedded, okay? Deeply rooted. So he's saying the corruption in the ANC is deeply rooted and it has wreaked havoc, right, with devastating consequences on the governance of the country. That now explains ESCOM. That now explains Transnet. That now explains why our transport and logistics is failing, okay? That now explains why the Rand Water has been struggling to maintain clean water. That now explains why Vaal River has sewage in the water that is meant for drinking. Okay? That explains why the beaches in KZN have sewage. That explains Umgeni water having sewage. You get the point? Because it has devastating consequences on the governance of the country and the lives of the poor people, of whom there continue to be so many. Let's proceed. Of course, the ANC did not invent corruption. For me, that this was a detour from the letter. Whether it was required or not, I'm of the view it was not required. He says we inherited a state that was morally bankrupt and that was built on most profound forms of corruption. When we took over government in 1994, we had the moral high ground and the conviction that we would be able to root out the old boys network that had benefited from and strangled the apartheid economy. I'm not going to comment on that, except that he said it was morally bankrupt and they had a moral high ground. Yet 3 decades later, the ANC's own track record of corruption is a cause of great shame. Wait a minute. Can an individual walk back from something that brings them shame? Do you think that's possible? The corruption we once decried is now part of our movement's what? DNA. My goodness, that means it runs in the veins, in their blood. Every single drop of blood in their veins is corrupted. That's what it means. DNA is that which makes you you. If we were to be able to analyze your DNA, we would be able to tell how tall you are going to be, the color of your eyes, your skin, the hair, and so on and so forth. You can go to the scientists. They will tell you how useful the DNA is. It gives you everything there is to know about that individual. Yet Msimanga is saying here, corruption is that rooted in the ANC, that it's in its DNA, meaning every cell of the ANC is corrupted. If I'm using a human being, every blood drop that is in the veins of the African National Congress is corrupted. So of necessity, when you become a member of the ANC, you will be corrupted. And you will be callous because you will drive agendas that militate against communities and society. Do you understand what he's saying here? That's my interpretation of that statement. Over 4 million people live in shacks that are euphemistically referred to as informal settlements. Has this ceased? No. Has the DNA been cleansed? No. Can it be cleansed? No. Remember, corrupt people, they suffer from a lack of knowledge that they are corrupt, that their actions are corrupt. Don't forget that. Do not forget that. Now, over 4 million people live in shacks that are euphemistically referred to as informal settlements. And in every town, there are people whom we call beggars, who collect at traffic lights and in town squares. They are not beggars, of course, for that is not their identity. They are human beings who have been forced to sacrifice their dignity in part because of my party's successive failures. Did you see now why I interpreted the previous paragraph to say, of necessity, when you become an ANC member and you are in leadership, you have to perform acts that militate against community and society. Literally. Why? Because you are in an organization whose DNA is corrupt to the core. It gives birth to people who are corrupt to the core. Don't have to look very far. Look at the ANC Youth League that has formed a different organization elsewhere. Okay? There are youth in this country who believes that such a corrupted... I mean, think about this. Think about what Msimanga wrote here. The DNA of this organization is corrupt to the core. Okay? So what do you think is going to give birth to? Because even the Bible tells us that each creature gives birth after its own kind. So a creature, if I were to use the example of creation, a creature whose DNA is corrupted, what do you think it's going to give birth to? To creatures whose DNA are what? Corrupted. Exactly. Because it gives birth after its own kind. This explains why we have the big mouth red beret. Don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on this one. Now let's proceed. And in every town, okay, we read that. They are human beings, but they've been forced to sacrifice their dignity. In part because of my party's successive failures. No, say those so-called failures, they are engineered failures. They have been, for an example, Ramaphosa, prior to his takeover, removes Matsela Koko without following. He gives an instruction to cabinet, whilst he was still deputy president, without following any fair labor practices, remove Matsela Koko from being a CEO. One of the only 2 CEOs that have stopped load shedding in this country. Ramaphosa removes him. And then what happens? what happens? We have an endemic load shedding. You remove a CEO, he goes to Labour Court. The Labour Court finds you as ESCOM guilty of dismissing him. Instead of reinstating him, Ramaphosa connives with NPA to go and create charges to persecute this individual. One of the only 2 CEOs that stopped load shedding. And we have been load shedding ever since Ramaphosa was determined that I'm going to chase this guy. I'm going to use state apparatus to abuse this person. We are suffering the consequences of his gigantic chip on both his shoulders. Can you see that? We are suffering the consequences of that as a country, such that we are nearing disinvestments. ArcelorMittal has lost so many jobs, and VW is threatening to leave the country. The ports are not working because of load shedding, because of Ramaphosa. So these are engineered failures. These successive failures have been deliberately planned and purposed. Why? Because those who are in leadership, they are in leadership of a corrupted DNA. So what happens in such an organization? Nobody tells the other one what you are doing is wrong. How can they know? Because they've seared their conscience with hot iron. According to what Msimang is saying here, their DNA. Okay? The DNA determines every cell that's going to come out there. So if the DNA is corrupt, it will produce cancerous cells, which is what we see here in this so-called African National Congress. Let's proceed. I'm saying so-called because it's not a Congress anymore. It's something else. Let's proceed. He says, we are an organization that purports to create a better life for all. Now, remember, I didn't write this. Msimang wrote this. Msimang wrote this, right? He wrote this. What does purport mean? That means you pretend to create a better life for all when you know that's not what you are doing. Now, you can check that out for yourself in English. Maybe I should show you instead of relying on you to check it. There you go. Appear to be or do something, especially falsely. Do you see that? She's not the person she purports to be. What is Msimanga saying concerning the ANC? He says that we are an organization that purports, that pretends to be creating the better life for all when we are not. We have a new black middle class. He says a new black middle class has grown and developed, which is commendable. However, this middle class is leaving behind people who die before ambulances can reach them, or perish in the hallways of overflowing under-resourced public hospitals, meaning this middle class has not been given the tools of trade. Why? Because the comrades' hands are in the cookie jar. They are stealing. That's why, remember, they can't help themselves. Their DNA is corrupt to the core, according to Msimang. Let's proceed. As ANC leaders publicly proclaim ownership of obscenely wealthy homesteads and possessions. Wait a minute. Here he's talking about Jacob Zuma 260 million house, Ngandla. He's talking about Paul Mashatile 37 million house. Now, Ngandla is still a sin against us, by the way, in case you forgot that. But let's set Ngandla aside because it has been, how can I say, looked into so many times, and Jacob Zuma had been asked to pay back the money. You know the story. But what about the Paul Mashatile who stays in a house of 37 million? Because if you're talking about a house of 3.5 million or a house of 4 million, your repayments are 35,000 a month or 40,000 rands a month on a house of 3.5 million. On a house of 1 million, your repayments are sound, and I'm being modest here, about 10,000 rands a month. A bond of 2 million, 20,000 rands a month. A bond of 30 million, 3,000 rands a month, give or take. You can use your financial calculator. You're not going to be very far from where the facts that I'm giving you. Now, 37 million, right? It's no longer 3 million, 37 million. So how much do you think his bond is supposed to be? Where does he get the money for that? Or it's not a bond. Where did he get the 37 million? Because what did Paul Mashatile do? He worked in the ANC offices. he became an MEC in Gauteng of different departments. If you look retrospectively in his lifestyle, you look at all his salaries combined, including the current one, there's no way he should be staying in a property worth 37 million, period. I'm not saying this because I'm angry. Okay? The nature of my job, which I may not disclose to you, is to do exactly what I've just said now. To check the quality of lifestyle that the individual is living, if it is directly consistent with his disposable income. Okay? Very, very important. Now let's continue. And there is no reconciliation between Paul Mashatile lifestyle and his, his income. There's absolutely no correlation. People can convince themselves of a lie that no, Comrade Paul deserves. No, he doesn't deserve it. Nobody deserves to live that life if they are not a wealthy business person who has created a business that served a particular purpose. Maybe you came up with the penicillin. Maybe you came up with a cure for cancer. Then, of course, you're going to be rich. Maybe you're an Elon Musk. You started your own business. You sold it for hundreds of millions and then hundreds of billions. If you look at how Elon Musk grew to where he is, it's blood, sweat, and tears. Working hard. Now, we are not aware where Paul Mashatile worked hard, unless, of course, you think that being an MEC is working hard. Now, I'm not going to make a digression to go to that because it's absolutely nonsensical that we have people who are called MECs in the first place. Let's proceed. As ANC leaders publicly proclaim ownership of obscenely wealthy homesteads and other possessions and send their children to the best schools in the land, there are still many South Africans whose children continue to be exposed to the risk of dropping into a pit latrines. Wait a minute. What is a pit latrine? Those are the toilets. It's not a waterborne toilet. It's what we call a pit toilet, where if a child falls in there, they may not be recovered. Particularly, how do they fall in there? There's normally no adult supervision by the time of their fall. You look and look and look and look, and somebody says, but the toilet is open. Have you checked if the child has not fallen there? And those holes are normally very deep. And I'm not going to talk about what's in there, but normally those children are not found alive. And I'm from the Eastern Cape. I have a lived experience of this type of toilets. Why do these toilets still exist today in our rural areas after 30 years, 29 solid years of having the Congress of the people in charge of the country? Right? For me, is not known. And Msimang is saying exactly the same thing here. So how can he then walk back from this? What part of what we have read so far can Msimang simply drop and say, no, I was joking, I'm coming back? These things that he wrote here have been perpetrated by his party, which he says himself over here that they have been pretending. We are an organization that purports to create a better life for all, meaning that pretends to create a better life for all. Can you see that? Okay, now, let's move on then. As ANC leaders, okay, I read that. There are children in rural areas. Oh, no. I didn't finish that sentence. So he says, continue to be exposed to the risk of dropping into pit latrines in poorly equipped public schools and dying horrendous and humiliating deaths. There are children in rural areas who miss classes when streams and rivers are in flood because there are no bridges. That's actually very true. How does it come about that raw sewage flows in Umgeni River? Indeed, please explain, Mr. Msimang. How does it come about that sewage flows into the sea, polluting eThekwini beaches that have been traditionally holiday destination for black people from inland provinces, some of whom used to travel as far as north of Limpopo, northwest Mpumalanga, etc. Has this problem been resolved, Mr. Msimang? For what earthly reason did the Gauteng Department of Health think that frailly, elderly, and very vulnerable people should be sent to ill-equipped and ill-prepared and ill-funded houses under the guise of unqualified NGOs, resulting into death of some 160 people, as happened in the Life Esidimeni scandal? Did David Makura, was he sent to jail for this? No. He's still alive, jumping up and down outside prison, but 160 people are dead because of his decision. Same with Qedani Mahlangu. And when you are busy withdrawing your letter, how honest was your letter, say? What was the level of sincerity when you penned this letter? Look at that, load shedding. Okay, they say remain suspended. But still, he claims businesses are failing, downsizing, or simply deciding not to invest anymore in our country, where the environment has become entirely disabling for them. And this is very true. I can give you a list of endless stories of this, but I've got videos that talks to that. If you look where I'm talking about the comrades whose hands are in the cookie jar, where Ramaphosa was saying we have a story to tell. I've done videos on this subject. As a result, thousands of jobs are being lost at the time when unemployment rate ranges north of 32%. It's actually north of 42%. And 60%, no, it's 72% for persons aged between 15 to 24 years. Inexplicably, you have ministers, that is now Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, who attack the very private sector the president is inviting to be an essential part of social compact in a program to rebuild our economy and enable higher growth. That's the minister in the presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, the one who said that business is sabotaging the country. And I made a video about that. That's ridiculous. You don't go on the media and say the private sector is sabotaging the country only simply because two banks that runs in South Africa, one being an international bank, one being a local bank, claimed to have participated in a scandal of what you call tampering with the rand. And then you go publicly saying the private sector is sabotaging the economy. That's absolute nonsense. Private sector is not composed only of two banks. Let's proceed. So he says here, you do not need to dig too deeply to discover that most of the country's failures are linked to corruption somewhere in the system. Of course, how could they not be? Your DNA is corrupt as an organization. A tender that should never have been awarded, a job that should have gone to a better qualified, more deserving and less factionally aligned person. This is happening on the watch of the ANC government. It's not happening on their watch. They are the ones doing it. They are the ones doing it. I smile sometimes when MECs and ministers would stand on the podium on TV and say with a straight face, I have nothing to do with the budget of the department. Those are the decisions of the HOD. I do not hire and fire people in the department, blah, 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 and hide behind the PFMA, the Public Service Regulation, and the Treasury Regulation. They do not comply with any of those regulations. This is their language. If you do not do what I tell, I'm quoting verbatim. I'm not going to tell you who I'm quoting, but this is their language. If you do not go and do what I tell you to do within the next 24 hours, I want your resignation on my table. Do you hear me? And let me tell you something. You will not find a job in this Republic of South Africa. I will make your life miserable. Okay? From one end of the country to the other. By the time I'm done with you, you'll go to labor court, I will appeal your judgment. You'll go to the higher court, I will appeal it. You'll go to the higher, I will appeal it. You will be a pauper by the time I'm done with you. I heard this not once from somebody supposedly I'm supposed to respect. So I always laugh when these comrades come up on TV wearing ties, calling each other honorable members. I always laugh. Nevertheless, let us proceed. Don't believe anything that proceeds out of their mouth. Remember, it's not me who said that their DNA is corrupt. It's Msimang. And take it from the comrade. He's telling the truth. Now, let's proceed. He says, an ESCOM brought to its knees by high-level corruption and sabotage has literally rendered the nation powerless and all too often left in the dark. I like the fact that he says by high-level corruption because that includes the president, who at the time he was a deputy president deliberately dismissed Matsela Koko against Labor Relations Act. And Matsela Koko won the matter in court, and it's there. You can read it for yourself. Won the judgment is there for anybody who likes reading to read it. Won the matter in court. Instead of being reinstated, Ramaphosa conjured up another scheme with the NPA that Gogo was corrupt. Now, I'm not saying he's not corrupt, but the NPA has failed to prove such corruption in 6 years now. That's why the judge in court, the magistrate in court a month ago said, I'm striking this off the roll because this is unconstitutional, that a cloud should be hanging over a South African like this over so long a period of time. Why? The Constitution says in Section 35, 3D, that every South African is entitled to a speedy trial. It's not speedy if people have said you were corrupt 5 years ago, and then 5 years later they are still asking for postponement to still find evidence. That means they don't have the evidence, and they have even failed to make the evidence. And concerning the Labour Court judgment, Gogo, the state was asked to pay for Gogo's litigation fees. That's there for everybody to check it out. So he's right when he says Eskom has been brought to it by high-level corruption. But it's disingenuous of him. I couldn't say that when he was leaving the ANC, but now that he's going back, I can point that out. It's disingenuous of him not to have mentioned that is by President Ramaphosa, because he was quick to mention President Zuma. Was Zuma corrupt? Of course, to the core. He's the patriarch of corruption. Nevertheless, let's proceed. So he says, Transnet mismanagement has derailed its freight haulage system. In consequence, road transporters who have stepped into the bridge sometimes have to wait 40 kilometers long. I mean, right now, Transnet has got 70,000 containers carrying goods, okay, that are supposed to be sold. Products, semi-manufactured goods that are supposed to help complete the production of cars and all manner of goods that must be produced. They are stuck in the sea, and they've been stuck there for now almost 2 months by the end of this month. And Transnet is losing something like 100 billion a day. Not 100 billion, 100 million a day. And when I counted it, I said in 10 days, that's 1 billion. So in a month, that's 3 billion that they are losing, just by those containers standing there, not being taken off those ships. And companies are finding alternative ports at which they should send their freight, as far as, well, it's been said that they are even willing to go to Kenya. And Kenya is literally quite far from South Africa. What's going to happen with South Africa then? That means disinvestment. Think about this. So he says here, they sometimes have to wait in 40-kilometer long queues while belching noxious gases into the atmosphere because ports are congested. That is true. The resulting demurrage charges are inevitably ultimately borne by the consumer. That is also true. That is why everything has gone up. Your food, well, our petrol prices, our meat, interest rates, your car, if you're paying your car is higher, if you're paying a bond is higher, everything is higher. Why? Because these charges have to be passed on to the consumer. The litany of economic and social woes, crime, unemployment, destitution associated with my beloved African National Congress is not only embarrassing, but also defies enumeration. What does that mean? They cannot be accounted for. How do you walk that back? And you want me to think you have integrity? Huh? How do you walk this back? Have you no shame? It's a matter of public record that over a decade, I have added my voice to many others that have consistently decried and disapproved of corruption and its harmful byproducts of nepotism and incompetence. Now I'm beginning to doubt your sincerity. I think you are simply echoing the decry of others without sincerity. That's why you are able to go back to this. Literally, it's like what Peter says. A dog has gone back to its vomit. That's basically it here. How do you go back to this environment? The response of leadership to this constructive censure has at best been a shoulder shrug and a promise to do something about which is what they've just done now. So you knew that they are going to make a promise. So how did you then walk your letter back? At worst, those who seek the change by raising voices endure slares or are met with downright hostility. Who cares about that? We have a country to save from these communists. So why would you care about that? If really you are a patriot who has integrity. Despite failures of the ANC and the manifold malfeasance referred to above, I am heightened that the South African spirit is alive and well. It is evident in the entrepreneurs found in every town, but this is in spite of the ANC and communities who manage to survive the barriers. You see it when you look at the organization like the Gift of the Givers. You know what he's trying to do here, literally, Malume Vutel. Okay, Malume Podisa. It is demonstrated in the creative talent. Okay, I'm going to skip all of that and get to alas. Despite these and other glimmering flashes of positivity, the ANC is on the verge of losing power. This is the reason why Mavuso wanted to leave. How power drunk must you be? That this is the main reason why you wanted to leave, in spite of everything else we have said. How power drunk must you be? So if there is a glimpse that no, the polls were not telling the truth, you are willing to go back to this vomit, to this party who's so corrupt according to you that even their DNA is corrupt. Amazing, Mr. Msimang. I hope you see this video. Amazing. I, as a young South African, am completely unimpressed by people like you, sir. You lack integrity. It's pretty clear. You lack it. You have not yet learned what integrity is. You have been echoing what you heard others saying. That is why you can go back to this rot. We are serious about getting rid of this rot. And we know it's going to take a lot. Just like it took a lot to get to our freedom. It may take suffering and sacrifice. But we are not deterred. Because we have a country to save from these communists. That includes you, sir. It is because its own posters have warned the ANC is currently falling significantly short of securing outright victory during next year's elections. That's beside the point. The points which you have listed in this letter are so significant that no human being who has one single brain functioning in their head can walk back. Just one. That's all you needed. And just a mustard seed ounce of integrity. This dramatic decline in the organization popularly is attributed to widely held perceptions that its members and employees are corrupt. Those are not perceptions. Those are facts, and you've said it for yourself. And that the organization has a high tolerance thresholds for venality. That's not a perception. You know it, you've already articulated it. And that the deployment of unsuitable people accounts for the government's deplorable levels of service to the public. How do you walk this back? To address these societal perceptions, the ANC Veterans League in resolution passed its past conferences and decisions subsequently taken at the League's successive National Executive Committee meetings urged the leadership of the organization to ensure that members who have been accused of criminality or recommended for referral or to criminal justice institutions by commissions set up to investigate corruption should not be allowed to continue up in office. Now, this is the only thing that they promised you and you already ran back, and you want me to believe you have integrity? Wow. The Veterans League specifically recommended that such individuals should be considered ineligible for nomination. It shouldn't be a recommendation. It should have been a demand. It shouldn't be a recommendation at all. To represent the ANC in 2024 national and provincial elections. Unfortunately, the ANC-NEC has shown no urgency to deal with this matter. Consequently, I have come to the realization that My time and energies will be better spent elsewhere. Even as I painfully sever ties with my once glorious organization, I shall continue to keep the vigil over any and all matters pertaining to governance in the country. No, sir, we don't need people like you to keep vigil over governance, because clearly you don't know what integrity means. You don't know what what you call good governance is. You've written a letter that is an indictment to any human being. Therefore, for you to now have levels of tolerance of what you wrote in this letter speaks a lot about your lack of integrity. It's not easy to leave an organization that continues to be home to some of the most dedicated individuals, dedicated in corruption. I have had a good fortune and honor and privilege to call comrades. This is a problem with South Africa. South Africans need to be deprogrammed from politics, from ideology, and focus on building one nation under God. I mean, if you look at the letter that I've just taken you through, can any reasonably prudent individual that has integrity walk this letter back? Be honest. Can any reasonably prudent person walk this letter back and say, I've changed my mind? Really? So this is more like I went to Woolworths and bought, or to Nando's, the good example. I went to Nando's and bought barbecue, lemon and herb. Then I said, no, I've changed my mind. I want extra hot. So to you, this decision is as easy as saying, no, I no longer want lemon and herb. I want extra hot. Really? I submit to you, you do not know what integrity is. I submit to you that some of the things you have written in this letter have long affected you, unbeknown to you. That the same DNA of the African National Congress, which you have been partaking in for 60-something plus years, as you said, has already been imbibed in your own personal spirit and soul. That's my submission to you. Prove me wrong. I submit to you that the decay that you have enumerated on this letter nothing has changed. So why have you changed your decision? Nothing has changed. This is an indictment. And I did say when I made that video, why did you change? What took you so long to change your mind? Because anybody that has integrity, who is in the African National Congress, would resign. Anybody who knows the Lord, for an example, cannot be a member of the African National Congress. I'm not talking about pretenders. There were a lot of Pharisees in the Bible as well. I'm not talking about that. You cannot reconcile your walking in faith with God with this type of venom, with this type of an organization. This is literally, the ANC has become a Luciferian organization. And you are telling me you are going back to that Luciferian organization that has no feeling for its people, that is willing to allow people to die whilst they are looting the state resources, that is willing to allow children to keep on falling on pit latrines, that is willing to allow the elderly and the fragile to die, and there are no consequences. Makura is smiling on our television sets to this very day. And you want to tell me you're going back to that? Wow. How the mighty have fallen. Then it means perhaps I need to do a video here that tells people what integrity is. It certainly is not what Msimang described, what we call by his behavior. I'm not talking about in the letter his behavior. I'm not talking about what Msimang has been saying in the last 10 years, because clearly he didn't mean it. He has been repeating what he had other people saying. That's my submission, guys. You tell me what yours is on the what you call email below. Now, of course, I'm not asking you whether was I harsh on Msimang, because I know I wasn't. I'm simply saying that's my submission, that's my opinion. You can give me your own on the comments down below. Ciao, ciao. Have a lovely one. This is embarrassing. Very, very embarrassing for our country. If you can think that what has been regarded as some of men of integrity can behave the way that Msimang has done, it demonstrates how far down the moral sewer has our country gone? Where are the men of integrity? Where are the women of integrity? Please raise up your hands. Let us meet with our shoulders and put them on the deck and remove these communists from power. Remember, we have a country to save. We will have no country for our children if we allow these ideologues to run rampant as they have in the past 29 years in our country. Okay, I'm out, guys. It's been 45 minutes. Ciao, ciao. See you in the next video. Bye now.